That accent is atrocious. Who taught you French? The maid? Dr. Sebastian Castellano's voice echoed through the Sterling Institute's lobby. The famous polyglot stood surrounded by wealthy scholars. The young black woman holding a napkin tray froze. His eyes flicked to the older black woman in a housekeeping uniform nearby. Oh, wait, the maid is your mother. He crumpled a napkin and tossed it at her feet. Your mother cleans toilets. You don't correct me. No one objected. Grace Johnson bent down, trembling, and pulled her daughter Keisha toward the exit, but he'd just destroyed the wrong woman. While he mocked her accent, Keisha was hiding something that would end his career. In 24 hours, this maid's daughter would speak so many languages so flawlessly that Dr. Castellano would sit humiliated and silent while the world watched. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea they'd just made a fatal mistake? 45 minutes later, Keisha sat with her mother in the staff break room. Grace hadn't said a word since they left the lobby. She just stared at her coffee, shame radiating from every inch of her body. Keisha wanted to say something. Anything. But what could she say? This wasn't the first time someone had treated them like they were invisible, like they were less than. It was just the first time it had happened in front of 500 people. Down the hall, voices rose in panic. Maria Santos, the conference coordinator, was on the phone in her office. The door stood open. Her voice carried clearly. What do you mean he's not coming? The Emirati delegation arrives in 6 hours. Keisha looked up. Grace noticed too. They heard another voice. Dr. Patricia Morrison, the Institute's director. Maria, without an Arabic interpreter, will have to cancel the entire diplomatic session. That's the centerpiece of tomorrow's program. Maria's voice cracked with stress. I've called everyone, every agency in the city. No one has an Arabic interpreter available on this short notice. Keisha's hands tightened around her own coffee cup. She spoke Arabic. She'd been teaching herself for 4 years, listening to lectures through the walls while waiting for her mother to finish her shift, practicing with Ahmed, the security guard from Yemen, reading Al Jazeera on her phone during lunch breaks. But who would listen to the maid's daughter? Grace looked at her, really looked at her. For a long moment, mother and daughter just stared at each other. Then Grace stood up. Mom, what are you doing? Grace didn't answer. She walked down the hall toward Dr. Morrison's office. Keisha followed, heart pounding. Grace knocked on the open door. Dr. Morrison looked up, surprised to see the head housekeeper standing there. Grace? Is everything all right? Grace's voice was quiet but steady. Dr. Morrison, my daughter speaks Arabic. The room went silent. Maria looked up from her phone, skepticism written across her face. Grace, this is a professional diplomatic interpretation. We need someone certified. But Dr. Morrison was studying Keisha with curious eyes. She'd known this girl since she was 14, always reading in corners, always listening. Keisha, Morrison said carefully. Is this true? Keisha's throat felt tight. After what had just happened in the lobby, standing here felt like walking into another ambush. But her mother was looking at her with such hope. Yes, ma'am. I speak Arabic. I can help tomorrow. Maria started to object, but Dr. Morrison held up her hand. Come to my office, both of you. 20 minutes later, Keisha sat in a leather chair while Dr. Morrison made a phone call. Grace stood by the door, hands clasped together. Dr. Li Wei arrived within minutes. He was a linguistics professor from Beijing, one of the Institute's most respected scholars. Patricia, what's this about? He noticed Keisha and Grace. His expression showed confusion. Li, I need you to assess someone's language abilities, right now. Dr. Li looked at Keisha. Recognition flickered across his face. Isn't she Grace's daughter, the one Castellano embarrassed earlier? The words hung in the air. Everyone had heard about it. Morrison nodded. The same. She says she speaks Arabic, and apparently several other languages. Dr. Li's eyebrows rose. He pulled up a chair and addressed Keisha directly in Arabic. It wasn't simple Arabic. It was complex, formal, the kind used in diplomatic settings. Keisha responded without hesitation. Her Arabic flowed naturally, discussing current events in the Middle East, navigating the formal register with ease. Dr. Li sat forward. He switched to Egyptian colloquial Arabic, a completely different dialect. Keisha switched with him. Her accent adjusted. The rhythm changed. Maria's pen stopped moving on her clipboard. Dr. Li switched again, this time to a technical passage. reading from a diplomatic brief on his phone. He asked Keisha to interpret it into English. She did, perfectly, capturing every nuance, every cultural implication, every shade of meaning. Grace's hand moved to cover her mouth. Dr. Lee set down his phone. "Where did you study Arabic?" "I taught myself," Keisha said quietly. 4 years. I listened to your lectures through the walls while I waited for my mom to finish her shifts. I practiced with Ahmed at the security desk. I watched Al Jazeera with subtitles until I didn't need them anymore. The room was utterly silent. Dr. Morrison leaned forward. "You said you speak several languages. Which ones?" Keisha hesitated. This felt like bragging, like overstepping, but her mother nodded at her. "Go on. Spanish, my grandmother spoke it. Mandarin, I practiced with the kitchen staff. French, Portuguese, and Italian. I used apps and YouTube. Russian and Korean. There are communities near where I live. Swahili. My mother's family is from Kenya. German. I read literature online." She counted in her head. 11 total, including English. Maria actually laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. "That's not possible. You can't just teach yourself 11 languages. But Dr. Lee wasn't laughing. He addressed Keisha in Mandarin. Rapid academic Mandarin discussing linguistic theory. Keisha responded in Mandarin. Fluent. Natural. Dr. Lee's mouth fell open. "Your accent. That's Beijing. Native level." He tested her in Russian. She responded. Korean. She responded. French. She responded with a perfect Parisian accent. Each time he pushed harder, more complex vocabulary, more specialized topics. Each time she met him exactly where he was. Finally, Dr. Lee sat back in his chair. He looked at Dr. Morrison with something like awe. "Patricia, I've evaluated hundreds of language students in my career. I've never seen natural ability like this." He turned to Keisha. "How is this possible?" Keisha's voice was soft. "When you spend 10 years waiting for your mom's shift to end, you find ways to fill the time. The Institute has classes in every language. I just listened." The weight of that statement settled over the room. For 10 years, this brilliant young woman had been invisible to everyone here. Learning, growing, becoming extraordinary, and no one had noticed. Dr. Morrison's expression shifted. She looked at Grace, then at Keisha. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. You'll interpret for the Emirati delegation, provisional. If you succeed, we discuss your future here." Keisha could barely breathe. "Yes, ma'am." Maria started to protest. "Patricia, we can't just—" "We can and we will." Morrison's voice was firm. "Keisha, understand something. You'll face resistance. People will doubt you, especially after what happened tonight." The unspoken name, Castellano. "But if you can do what Dr. Lee says you can do, you'll prove them all wrong." Grace squeezed her daughter's shoulder. Pride and fear mixed on her face. As they left the office, Keisha's mind raced. Tomorrow she would stand in front of diplomats and scholars. Tomorrow she would prove she belonged in rooms her mother had only entered to clean. Tomorrow she would show everyone what the maid's daughter could do. That night, Keisha couldn't sleep. She lay in her small bedroom in Queens, staring at the ceiling. On her nightstand sat a worn leather journal, her father's journal. David Johnson had been a translator at the United Nations. He spoke 6 languages. He'd died of a sudden heart attack when Keisha was 7 years old. She picked up the journal now, running her fingers over the cracked leather. Inside were notes in multiple languages: English, Spanish, French, Arabic, Swahili, Portuguese, his handwriting forever frozen in time. The last entry was dated 3 days before he died. "Language is the bridge between who we are and who we can become. Teach this to Keisha." After he died, Grace couldn't afford their apartment. She'd moved them to a smaller place and taken the job at Sterling Institute. Double shifts, weekends, holidays, whatever it took to keep food on the table and save for Keisha's education. When Keisha turned 14, Grace started bringing her to work during evening shifts. It was safer than leaving her home alone in their neighborhood. That's when it started. While Grace cleaned classrooms, Keisha did her homework in storage closets. She listened to lectures through air vents. She practiced pronunciation in empty conference rooms at midnight. The Institute became her university. Ahmed taught her Arabic greetings, then full conversations. Chef Lin spoke Mandarin with her during kitchen cleanup. Elena from the cafeteria corrected her Spanish. The professors never knew she was there, but she learned from them anyway. She'd gotten into CUNY on a partial scholarship, majored in communications because it was affordable. Graduated 6 months ago with honors, then nothing. Job interviews where they said she lacked experience. Graduate school applications rejected because she couldn't afford the fees to keep trying. She'd resigned herself to retail work, to never using these skills she'd spent years building. Until tonight. Keisha opened the journal to a blank page at the back. She wrote her first entry in years. Dad, tomorrow I get to use everything you taught me. Everything Mom sacrificed for, I'm terrified, but I'm ready. She wrote it in English first, then translated it into all 11 languages. The next morning, Keisha arrived at the Institute at 8:45. She wore a professional outfit borrowed from Dr. Morrison, who'd had Maria drop it off the night before. Her hands were ice cold. Grace was already there, cleaning an adjacent hallway. She caught Keisha's eye and mouthed, "You've got this." At 9 a.m. sharp, the Emirati delegation arrived. Omar al-Rashid was a senior diplomat, accompanied by 2 aides. They entered the private conference room where Dr. Morrison and several institute staff waited. Omar noticed Keisha immediately. His expression showed surprise at her youth. He whispered to his aide in Arabic. "They sent someone so young, and a woman?" The aide responded, also in Arabic. "This must be their emergency replacement, probably a graduate student." Keisha understood every word. She kept her face neutral. Omar addressed Dr. Morrison in English. "Before we begin, I must ensure proper understanding. These discussions are sensitive." Then he switched to Arabic, formal, deliberate. "We are discussing matters of cultural heritage that require more than simple vocabulary. This requires deep understanding of context and implication." He was testing her. Keisha interpreted into English. Her voice was steady. She matched his formality, his dignity, the subtle weight of his words. Omar's expression shifted. He was listening now. One of the aides spoke in a regional Emirati dialect, different from standard Arabic. He made a joke about American coffee being weak. The room waited. This was a different dialect entirely. Would she catch it? Keisha laughed and responded in the same Emirati dialect. She returned the joke gracefully, making a comment about Emirati hospitality being legendary, even in modest settings. The aide's eyes widened. Omar sat forward. He switched to classical Arabic, the kind used in formal religious and literary contexts. He quoted a proverb about wisdom appearing in unexpected places. This was the real test. Keisha didn't just translate. She recognized the source, explained the cultural weight, and responded with an equally appropriate classical phrase. Omar stopped the meeting. He said in Arabic to his team, "This woman is extraordinary." Then in English to Dr. Morrison, "Where did you find her?" Morrison smiled. "She's been here for 6 years. We just didn't know to look." The meeting continued for 90 minutes. Complex diplomatic discussions about cultural exchange programs, technical terminology, formal negotiations, subtle implications. Keisha handled all of it. She navigated formal and informal registers. She caught cultural references. She even prevented a potential misunderstanding before it could take root, gently clarifying a phrase that had multiple interpretations. At one point, Grace walked past the glass door. She saw her daughter commanding the room. She stopped, hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Omar noticed. "Who is that woman?" "My mother," Keisha said. "She works here." Omar nodded slowly. "She must be very proud." Keisha switched to Arabic. "She's the reason I can do any of this." When the meeting ended, Omar asked for Keisha's contact information. He handed her his business card with his direct number. "I will be requesting you specifically for all future institute engagements. You are among the finest interpreters I have encountered globally." As the delegation left, Dr. Morrison pulled Keisha aside. "That was exceptional." Her voice was warm. "We need to talk about your future here." But down the hall, someone else had been watching through the glass. Dr. Sebastian Castellano stood with his arms crossed. His expression was dark. He'd seen everything, and he was not pleased. That afternoon, Keisha returned to the staff break room where her mother was having lunch. As she walked past the faculty lounge, she heard voices. The door was slightly open. "Did you hear?" Grace's daughter interpreted for the Emiratis. Keisha slowed. She shouldn't listen, but she couldn't help it. Castellano's voice carried clearly. "This is absurd." One lucky session doesn't make someone a professional. But Dr. Lee tested her, someone else said. He says she's fluent in multiple languages. Lee is too generous. Castellano's tone was dismissive. These things require years of formal study, proper credentials. You can't learn languages from YouTube. Keisha's chest tightened. Another faculty member spoke up. What concerns me is the precedent. We have standards for a reason. What about professional liability? Insurance? Exactly, Castellano said. Today we make exceptions for the cleaning staff's children. Tomorrow? Where does it end? The words hit like a slap. Grace is a lovely woman, someone else added, but her daughter doesn't have the pedigree for this level of work. A degree from CUNY isn't the same as Columbia or Yale. Keisha forced herself to keep walking. Her hands shook. She found her mother in the break room. Grace took one look at her face and knew. You heard them. Keisha nodded, not trusting her voice. Grace pulled her daughter to sit down. Baby, listen to me. Did you do the job well this morning? Yes. Did that diplomat ask for you again? Yes, but no buts. Grace's voice was firm. For 22 years, I've cleaned rooms where people make decisions. You know what I've learned? The people who talk loudest about credentials are usually the ones most threatened by real talent. Keisha wanted to believe her, but the doubt crept in anyway. What if they were right? What if one good session was just luck? What if she didn't really belong in those rooms? Grace seemed to read her mind. When your father died, I had to choose. I could let grief destroy us, or I could give you a future. I chose you. Every single day, I chose you. She squeezed Keisha's hands. I didn't sacrifice everything so you could quit at the first sign of resistance. Meanwhile, in Dr. Morrison's office, another conversation was happening. Omar al-Rashid had sent a formal letter. Miss Johnson is among the finest interpreters I have encountered in 30 years of diplomatic service. I request her specifically for all future engagements. Dr. Lee had submitted a written assessment. Native-level proficiency in multiple languages, immediate hiring strongly recommended. Morrison reviewed the documents. Then she looked at the stack of formal objections that had appeared on her desk. 8 faculty members expressing concerns about institutional standards. Castellano had organized them. Maria knocked on her door. Patricia, we need to talk. Castellano is mobilizing the board. He's called an emergency faculty meeting for Friday. Morrison set down her reading glasses. Let me guess. He wants to discuss hiring practices. He's framing it as protecting the Institute's reputation. But it's really about protecting his ego. Morrison's voice was sharp. She'd seen this before. Threatened men hiding behind policy. She picked up her phone. Schedule the meeting, and make sure Keisha knows she's invited to attend. Maria's eyes widened. Patricia, that's unusual. Staff don't attend faculty meetings. Keisha isn't staff anymore. As of this moment, she's under provisional contract as an associate interpreter. Morrison's tone left no room for argument. If they want to discuss her qualifications, she deserves to be in the room. The battle lines were drawn. Friday would decide everything. Tuesday morning brought another crisis. The French cultural attaché arrived for a scheduled meeting. The regular French interpreter was stuck in traffic, caught in a major accident on the bridge. Dr. Morrison found Keisha in the library, studying. I need you again, French delegation. Can you handle it? Keisha grabbed her father's journal from her bag. For luck. Yes, ma'am. She still didn't have proper office clothes. She wore the same borrowed outfit from yesterday. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Technical discussions about international education partnerships, policy language, cultural nuances. The French attaché was impressed. Mademoiselle, your French is Parisian quality. Where did you study? YouTube mostly, Keisha said. His eyebrows shot up. You're joking. I'm not. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Remarkable. Truly remarkable. Wednesday brought an emergency that had nothing to do with interpretation. A Korean visiting scholar collapsed in the Institute cafe. The paramedics arrived quickly, but there was a critical language barrier. The scholar's wife was panicking, trying to explain his medical history. Keisha happened to be getting coffee. She rushed over. She spoke to the wife in Korean. Calm, reassuring. She got the medical history, the list of medications, the critical allergies. She interpreted everything for the paramedics. Clear, precise, potentially life-saving information. The scholar's wife gripped Keisha's hands, crying with relief and gratitude. Ahmed, the security guard, watched it all. Later, he found Grace. "Your daughter just saved that man's life. She's a blessing." Thursday evening, there was a public lecture series at the Institute. A Portuguese-speaking family attended. Their 5-year-old daughter wandered off during the reception. Security found the little girl in a stairwell, crying and terrified. No one could communicate with her. Keisha heard the commotion. She knelt down and spoke to the child in Portuguese. Soft, gentle. She dried the girl's tears and held her hand as they searched for her parents. When they found them, the mother hugged Keisha like she'd rescued her child from a burning building. By Thursday night, Maria had documented 7 separate instances where Keisha had provided crucial interpretation services. She compiled it into a report for Dr. Morrison. Letters of thanks from 4 diplomatic missions, incident reports from security, testimonials from grateful families. But the Institute staff had noticed something else too. Elena from the cafeteria told Grace, "Your daughter helped me with my visa paperwork. She translated everything from English to Spanish so I could understand it." Chef Lin said, "She's been practicing Mandarin with me for years. I didn't know she was that good. She could work in Beijing." The janitor, the kitchen staff, the security guards, they'd always known Keisha was special. They'd watched her grow up in the corners of this building. Now everyone else was finally seeing it too. But in the faculty lounge, the resistance was hardening. Castellano held an informal gathering Thursday evening. Wine and cheese, carefully selected attendees. "The question isn't whether she's talented," he told the group. "The question is whether we can afford to lower our standards. Once we do, there's no going back." He was convincing. 8 faculty members signed his petition. Professional credentials exist for a reason. We cannot make exceptions no matter how sympathetic the case. Friday morning arrived. The emergency faculty meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Keisha put on the borrowed outfit one more time. Her hands shook as she buttoned the blazer. Grace helped her, smoothing down the collar. "Remember who you are," Grace said quietly. "Remember what you can do. Make them see you." Keisha picked up her father's journal. It was time. The conference room was intimidating. 20 senior faculty members sat around a mahogany table. 8 board members filled chairs along the wall. This was bigger than Keisha expected. She and Grace sat in the back. Observers, technically. But everyone knew what this meeting was really about. Dr. Castellano stood to present first. He'd prepared slides, professional, polished. "Distinguished colleagues, we gather today to discuss standards that have defined this institution for 75 years. His voice was measured, reasonable. Standards that ensure excellence, protect our reputation, and maintain our credibility. He clicked to the next slide. His credentials filled the screen. 3 PhDs, 8 published books, 40 years of experience. These achievements didn't happen by accident. They happened through rigorous education, professional vetting, and institutional accountability. Another click. It has come to my attention that we are considering hiring someone with 0 professional certification, 0 graduate education, and 0 formal training in interpretation. He didn't name Keisha. He didn't have to. I understand the appeal of a compelling story, but we are not a charity. We are an institute of higher learning. Several board members nodded. Today we make exceptions. Tomorrow we lose accreditation. Where does it end? He sat down. The room was quiet. Dr. Morrison stood. Sebastian makes valid points about standards, so let me present some data about results. She distributed folders. Inside were copies of every letter, every testimonial, every piece of documentation Maria had compiled. In 1 week, Keisha Johnson has provided interpretation services to 4 diplomatic delegations, prevented 1 medical emergency, and assisted in 1 child rescue. 100% positive feedback. She paused. Our contracted interpretation service costs $200,000 annually and receives 60% satisfaction rating. A board member spoke up. But Dr. Morrison, 1 good week doesn't override the need for proper credentials. You're right, Morrison said. So let me introduce someone who can speak to professional standards. She opened the door. Omar al-Rashid walked in, formal diplomatic attire. The room straightened immediately. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to address this body. His voice carried natural authority. I have worked with interpreters from the United Nations, the European Union, and every major diplomatic language service globally. He looked directly at Keisha. Miss Johnson's ability ranks in the top 5% of professionals I have encountered in 30 years. More importantly, she prevented a significant diplomatic misunderstanding in Tuesday's session that a less skilled interpreter would have missed entirely. He turned back to the faculty. If you do not hire her, my government will contract her directly, and I will personally recommend her to every delegation I know. The room shifted. This wasn't about credentials anymore. This was about the Institute's reputation and diplomatic relationships. Morrison spoke again. I founded this institute 30 years ago on one principle. Language is a bridge, not a barrier. She looked around the room. Keisha Johnson has mastered 11 languages without our help, without our money, without our permission. The question isn't whether she's qualified. The question is whether we're worthy of her. A long silence. Then Morrison called for a vote. All in favor of creating an associate interpreter position for Keisha Johnson? Hands rose slowly, then more quickly. 14 in favor, 6 opposed. Castellano's face was stone. Morrison turned to Keisha. Miss Johnson, we'd like to offer you a position. Full-time, associate interpreter. Starting salary $68,000 with benefits. Keisha could barely breathe. I accept. Grace squeezed her daughter's hand so hard it hurt. Later that afternoon, Dr. Morrison asked Keisha to her office. I want to give you something. She handed Keisha a leather portfolio embossed with the Institute seal. Every interpreter here receives one. It's tradition. Inside was a handwritten note. To Keisha, your father would be proud. Your mother already is. Now it's the rest of the world's turn to see what they've been missing. Patricia Morrison. Keisha had to set it down. Tears blurred her vision. Morrison sat in the chair beside her, not behind her desk. Can I tell you something I don't share publicly? Keisha nodded. Yale, 1982. I was the only scholarship student in my linguistics cohort. Morrison's voice was quiet. A professor told me I'd never succeed because I lacked the cultural refinement of my peers. He meant I was poor, from Ohio, not from the right family. She smiled sadly. That moment could have ended me. Instead, it became my fuel. Did you ever doubt yourself? Keisha asked. Every single day. Until I realized they weren't doubting my ability. They were doubting my right to have it. The connection between them solidified in that moment. Morrison stood. Come on, let me show you your office. It was small but professional. A desk, a bookshelf, a window with a view of the courtyard. A nameplate on the door. Keisha Johnson, Associate Interpreter. Keisha touched the nameplate like it might disappear. Grace arrived a few minutes later, still in her uniform. She'd finished her shift but came to see. Mother and daughter stood in the doorway together. Your father would be impossible right now, Grace said, tears in her eyes. He'd be so proud he wouldn't shut up about it. They laughed and cried at the same time. Keisha pulled out her father's journal. She placed it on her new desk in the center where she could see it. He's here, she said. Grace nodded. He always was. Dr. Li Wei stopped by with Chinese tea. Welcome to the team. Your Mandarin is better than mine. Don't tell anyone I admitted that. They shared a moment of mutual respect. As the day ended, Keisha sat at her desk. She opened her father's journal to a blank page. She wrote one sentence in English. Dad, I made it. Then she translated it into all 11 languages: Spanish, Mandarin, Arabic, French, Portuguese, Russian, Korean, Swahili, Italian, German. Each translation was perfect. Each one was a promise kept. Some victories aren't loud, they're quiet. They're a daughter at a desk her father never got to see her sit at. They're a mother watching her sacrifice turn into her daughter's success. They're proof that excellence doesn't ask for permission, it just waits to be seen. 2 weeks later, the Sterling Institute hosted its annual Global Linguistics Summit. The same grand ballroom, the same marble floors, the same crystal chandeliers, the same place where Dr. Castellano had humiliated Keisha. But this time, everything was different. Tonight, Keisha Johnson was the lead interpreter for the evening's international panel. 6 speakers, 6 languages. The centerpiece event of the entire summit being live-streamed to viewers around the world. She wore a professional outfit now, her own, purchased with her first paycheck. Grace was working the event as housekeeping supervisor. She caught Keisha's eye from across the room and smiled. 45 minutes before the panel was scheduled to begin, disaster struck. The simultaneous interpretation equipment failed. Complete system malfunction. No backup available. Maria found Dr. Morrison backstage, panic in her voice. "We have to cancel. There's no way to interpret 6 languages consecutively in real time for 90 minutes. It's impossible." Castellano overheard. He was tonight's keynote speaker scheduled right before the panel. "This is exactly why professional standards matter," he said to Morrison. "Equipment fails. We need experienced experts who can handle any situation." His eyes landed on Keisha. The contempt was barely hidden. "Unless you think your recent hire can manage 6 languages for 90 minutes in front of 500 people?" The challenge hung in the air. Morrison pulled Keisha aside. "I cannot ask you to do this. It's too much. We'll cancel." But Keisha looked at the panel description posted outside the ballroom. "The future of global communication, breaking down barriers." The irony wasn't lost on her. "I can do it," she said. "Keisha, this will be live-streamed. International press is here. If you struggle even for a moment, it will follow you forever." Keisha thought about her father, about her mother cleaning these floors for 22 years, about every time someone had dismissed her as less than. "Dr. Morrison, I've been preparing for this my entire life. I just didn't know it." Morrison studied her face, then nodded. "Okay, but understand this is your choice. No one will blame you if you say no." 15 minutes later, the lights came up. Dr. Morrison stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've experienced a technical failure with our interpretation equipment. However, we are fortunate to have Keisha Johnson, who will provide consecutive interpretation for all 6 languages." A murmur rippled through the crowd. 500 people, cameras, press. Someone audibly said, "That's impossible." The 6 panelists took their positions. Arabic, Mandarin, Russian, French, German, Italian. Keisha stood at center stage, visible to everyone. This was it. The French panelist opened with a 2-minute statement on linguistic preservation. Keisha waited until he finished. Then she translated into English. Her voice was clear, confident, perfect. The room went quiet, listening. The moderator posed a question. 4 panelists responded in rapid succession. Russian, 90 seconds. Mandarin, 60 seconds. Arabic, 75 seconds. Italian, 90 seconds. Keisha interpreted each one consecutively. She switched between languages without hesitation. Her mind tracked every point, every nuance, every cultural reference. The audience was transfixed. 30 minutes in, the panel entered a complex trilateral discussion. The German and Russian panelists were debating. The Mandarin panelist kept interjecting. Keisha tracked all 3 conversations simultaneously. She interpreted each speaker's points in sequence, maintaining the flow of the argument so the English-speaking audience could follow. Dr. Li Wei, sitting in the audience, leaned over to a colleague. "I've never seen anything like this in my life." 45 minutes in, the German panelist made a sophisticated linguistic joke. It was a play on words referencing German philosophy. It required deep cultural knowledge and wouldn't translate literally. The room waited. Would she render it word for word and lose the meaning? Or could she adapt it? Keisha paused, smiled slightly. Then she explained the philosophical reference in English and created an equivalent conceptual bridge that captured the humor. The audience laughed. The German panelist stood and applauded. The room followed with spontaneous applause. Castellano sat in the front row. His jaw was tight. His hands were still. 60 minutes in, the discussion turned highly technical. Phonetic drift, morphological evolution, academic linguistic theory. The Mandarin scholar used specialized terminology that required understanding both the language and the theoretical framework. Keisha interpreted with precision. She included the theoretical context. She demonstrated that she didn't just speak these languages, she understood them at an academic level. Then came the moment everyone would remember. During the question and answer session, Dr. Castellano stood. "I have a question." His voice carried across the room. "For the interpreter." Dr. Morrison, sitting in the front, tensed. "Sebastian, that's not appropriate." "A simple question of professional curiosity." He turned to face Keisha directly. 500 people watching. Cameras recording. He spoke in Italian. Asked her to explain the etymological relationship between several Romance language words and their divergent meanings. Then he switched to Russian. Asked about Slavic linguistic family connections. Then to Arabic. Asked about Arabic influence on Spanish during the Moorish period. He was trying to expose gaps in her theoretical knowledge, to embarrass her in front of everyone, to prove she was just good at mimicry, not true understanding. The room was dead silent. Grace, watching from the side corridor, gripped the doorframe so hard her knuckles went white. Keisha didn't flinch. She answered in Italian first, explained the Romance etymology with precision, switched to Russian, discussed Proto-Slavic roots and linguistic evolution, then Arabic. Traced the Moorish influence on Spanish through historical conquest and cultural exchange, but she didn't stop there. She tied all three answers together in English. She showed how these language families influenced each other through trade routes, conquest, and cultural exchange across centuries. She demonstrated a comprehensive understanding of linguistic history that went far beyond simple fluency. Then she looked directly at Castellano. But Dr. Castellano, I think you already knew the answers to these questions. So perhaps what you're really asking is whether someone who learned languages outside a university can understand their deeper structures. She paused. The answer is yes. Language doesn't care how you learned it. It only cares whether you understand it. And I do. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then Omar al-Rashid, sitting in the audience, stood and began to applaud. Dr. Li Wei stood. Then the Russian panelist, then the French, then the German. One by one, the entire audience rose. 500 people on their feet. Applause thundering through the ballroom. Cameras captured it all. Keisha stood alone on the stage, overwhelmed, tears in her eyes. Grace, watching from the corridor, was sobbing openly. And Dr. Sebastian Castellano? He sat alone, not applauding. His face was red. He couldn't look at anyone. He'd just been outclassed in front of the entire world by the woman he'd called uneducated 2 weeks ago, by the maid's daughter he'd thrown a napkin at, the woman whose French accent he'd mocked. The panel continued for another 30 minutes. Keisha interpreted flawlessly until the end. When it concluded, the standing ovation lasted 2 full minutes, and somewhere in that moment, everything changed. The moment Keisha stepped off the stage, she was swarmed. Diplomats, scholars, journalists, everyone wanted to talk to her. Business cards pressed into her hands faster than she could take them. Someone asked for a selfie. Camera flashes went off. The New York Times journalist pushed through the crowd. "Miss Johnson, can we interview you? This is exactly the story we need to tell." An NPR producer was right behind her. "We'd love to have you on Hidden Brain. Your story challenges everything about education access." A BBC reporter. "Our London office wants to feature you." Maria, standing nearby, looked stunned. In 20 years at the Institute, she'd never seen anything like this. Omar al-Rashid approached with 5 other diplomats. "Miss Johnson, my government would like to formally engage your services for the United Nations General Assembly next month." He handed her a contract. $50,000 for 2 weeks of work. Keisha had to sit down. "Additionally," Omar continued, "my government wishes to fund a linguistics scholarship in your name at a university in the UAE." She couldn't speak. Dr. Li Wei made his way through the crowd. "Columbia's linguistics department wants to offer you a full scholarship for their master's program. I've already recommended you." The French cultural attaché, "The Alliance Française would like you to consult on our interpreter training curriculum." The Russian panelist, "Moscow State University's linguistics department invites you as a guest lecturer." The offers kept coming. Google wanted to consult with her about their translation services. 3 interpretation agencies offered contracts. Someone from TED Talks left their card. 2 weeks ago, she couldn't get an interview for an entry-level position. Now the world wanted her. Dr. Morrison finally managed to get the crowd's attention. She stood at the front of the ballroom and called for quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've witnessed something extraordinary tonight, but many of you don't know the full story." She told them everything. How Keisha's father was a translator who died when she was 7. How Grace took a job at the Institute and worked double shifts to support them. How Keisha taught herself 11 languages while waiting for her mother to finish cleaning these very rooms. How she'd applied to graduate schools and been rejected. How she couldn't find professional work despite her degree. How 2 weeks ago she was helping her mother restock refreshments in this same ballroom. The audience was silent, processing. Tonight you saw mastery. But what you didn't see was the 16 years of invisible learning that came before it. The late nights studying in storage closets, the conversations with security guards and kitchen staff, the lectures absorbed through walls. Morrison's voice grew stronger. The Sterling Institute is creating the Grace and David Johnson Fellowship in Linguistic Excellence, named for Keisha's parents. $250,000 annually for talented linguists from non-traditional backgrounds. No degree requirements, only demonstrated ability. Keisha's hands covered her face. She was crying openly now. The first fellows will be announced next year. But understand what this means. We're saying officially, talent exists everywhere. Opportunity doesn't. We're going to change that. The applause was deafening. Grace was brought to the front. Mother and daughter embraced in the center of the ballroom while 500 people watched. Grace whispered in her daughter's ear, "Your daddy's watching, baby. I know he is." Then came the moment no one expected. Dr. Castellano had to cross the room to exit. There was only one path. It went directly past Keisha. The crowd parted. Everyone watched. Castellano stopped. He had no choice. Keisha saw him. She could have ignored him, could have let him pass in humiliation. Instead, she extended her hand. Dr. Castellano. He looked at her hand. The room held its breath. 3 seconds passed. 5. Then he took it. "Miss Johnson." His voice was strained. "I was wrong, profoundly wrong." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was acknowledgement. "We're all learning, Doctor," Keisha said quietly. "That's the beauty of language. There's always more to discover." She was giving him dignity he'd never given her. He nodded once and walked away. The crowd erupted again. That moment of grace had been captured on camera. It would be part of the story forever. Later, in a quieter corner of the reception, Grace pulled Keisha aside. "Baby, I need to show you something." She handed Keisha an envelope. Inside was a check, $50,000, the UN contract payment already processed. "Mom, that's our money now," Grace said firmly. "And I'm using it to tell you something. I'm retiring. Today." Keisha started to protest, but Grace held up her hand. "For 22 years, I cleaned this building so you could learn in it. I don't regret a single day, not one. But now you get to give me what I gave you, a choice." They were both crying. "Every floor I mopped was for you. Every toilet I cleaned was for your future." Grace's voice broke. "My mother cleaned houses in Kenya so I could come to America. I cleaned houses in America so you could rise. Maybe your daughter won't have to clean at all." That night, Keisha returned to her small office. She opened her father's journal and wrote a new entry, not just in one language, in all 11, English. "Dad, I made it. Not despite where I came from, because of it." Spanish. "Papá, lo logré, no a pesar de mis orígenes, sino gracias a ellos." Mandarin, the same sentiment in characters. Arabic, French, Portuguese, Russian, Korean, Swahili, Italian, German. Each translation was perfect. Each one was a promise fulfilled. The next 48 hours were a blur. The New York Times ran a front-page story, "The Polyglot Who Learned Languages While Her Mother Cleaned." The video of her performance went viral. 2 million views in 24 hours. LinkedIn exploded with connection requests. Universities sent formal scholarship offers. The comment sections were full of people saying, "I see myself in this story. My mom cleaned houses too. This made me cry." 1 week later, at a formal ceremony, Sterling Institute presented Keisha with the official Master Interpreter designation, the youngest person ever to receive it. Her nameplate was updated. Keisha Johnson, Master Interpreter. Her professional portrait was hung in the Institute's main hallway, right next to Dr. Castellano's. But the image that stayed with people wasn't from the ceremony. It was the photo taken right after the panel ended. Grace in her housekeeping supervisor uniform, Keisha in her professional attire, mother and daughter embracing in the center of the grand ballroom. The caption that ran with every article: 2 generations, 1 dream. 22 years of floors cleaned, 1 night of barriers broken. That photo became the face of the Johnson Fellowship, and somewhere in that moment between humiliation and triumph, between invisible and undeniable, between dismissed and celebrated, everything changed. Not just for Keisha, but for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong because of where they came from. 3 months later, Keisha sat in her office at the Sterling Institute preparing for a video conference. She was coordinating interpretation services for an upcoming international summit. Through her window, she could see the courtyard, the same courtyard where she used to wait for her mother's shift to end, studying languages on her phone. Her office was professional now, bookshelves filled with reference materials in 11 languages, framed certificates on the wall, a photo of her parents on her desk. Her mother didn't work at the institute anymore. Grace had retired and now volunteered teaching English to immigrants at a community center in Queens. Full circle, still serving, but on her own terms. The first Grace and David Johnson Fellows had been announced last week. Aisha was the first recipient, a 20-year-old daughter of a Somali cab driver. She spoke 9 languages, self-taught. She'd been working at a grocery store, her talent completely invisible to the world. Until now. Yesterday, Aisha had sat in this same office. Keisha had mentored her, just like Dr. Morrison had mentored Keisha. "I know what it's like to be underestimated," Keisha had told her. "Not on my watch." Sterling Institute had changed too. The Demonstrated Excellence Initiative had become a model. 5 other non-traditional candidates hired across various departments. Harvard and Yale had both reached out to learn about the program. The conversation was shifting, slowly, but shifting. Dr. Castellano still taught at the Institute. But something had changed in him, too. His classes now emphasized humility, openness, and recognizing talent wherever it appeared. He'd quietly funded a scholarship of his own. No press release, no announcement, just growth. Keisha's story had reached millions. The viral video, the articles, the interviews. But the messages that meant the most came from regular people. "My mother cleaned houses. Your story made me cry. I'm a janitor who speaks 4 languages. You gave me hope. I showed your video to my daughter. She finally believes she can do anything." That was the real victory. Not the contracts or the certificates or the media attention, the permission she'd given others to be seen. Keisha's phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Teaching class tonight. One of my students just got accepted to college, first in her family. Thought you'd want to know. Love you, baby." Keisha smiled. That evening, she taught a volunteer language class at the same community center where her mother worked. Basic professional English for immigrants and service workers. The room was packed. Night shift workers, cleaning staff, delivery drivers, people whose brilliance was hidden behind their job titles. One student stood out, a young black woman in a fast food uniform. She took notes intensely, asked smart questions. After class, she approached Keisha nervously. "Miss Johnson? I speak 4 languages, but I don't have a degree. Is there any hope for someone like me?" Keisha looked at her. Really looked at her. Saw herself 4 months ago. "What's your name?" "Destiny." "Destiny, let me tell you about a fellowship. Here's what they don't tell you about genius. It's not rare. It's everywhere. In the security guard who speaks 5 languages. In the housekeeper's daughter who taught herself 11. In the cab driver, the cashier, the person cleaning your office at night. Genius doesn't need permission to exist, but it does need witnesses. For 16 years, Keisha Johnson was brilliant. For 16 years, she was invisible. Those 2 things were true at the same time. How many Keishas are out there right now? In kitchens, on cleaning crews, driving trucks, stocking shelves. How much talent goes unnoticed because we've decided certain places can't produce excellence? So here's your challenge. This week, pay attention to the people you don't usually see. The security guard, the janitor, the delivery driver, the person serving your coffee. Not to save them, not to discover them, but because they're already fully human, already fully valuable, already possibly extraordinary. You just haven't looked. If you run a company, ask yourself, how do you evaluate talent? Are you screening out the next Keisha Johnson before she even applies? If you're in education, who are you making invisible with your requirements? If you're a parent, what assumptions are you teaching your children about who gets to be brilliant? And if you're someone who's been overlooked, dismissed, told you don't belong because of where you come from, your invisibility isn't proof of your inadequacy, it's proof of their blindness. Keisha Johnson walked through the Sterling Institute one last time that day. Staff greeted her by name, with respect, with admiration. She passed the grand ballroom. The marble floors still gleamed. She looked at her reflection. Same person, finally seen. And she walked on. Talent doesn't need permission, but it does need witnesses. Be someone who sees.